can't believe it!
But I'm here in front of my inspirations. I'm here in front of people I'm so motivated by.
Allowed shows all over the United States. It tells everybody it's not a fluke, man.
Primero, que no se rindan. A lo mejor hay muchos obstáculos en el camino, pero...
Beginning September 15th through October 15th, Milwaukee Film's Hispanic Heritage Month will work to elevate the work of Latinx filmmakers while celebrating Hispanic culture through film, food, and music. Join us for a kickoff event on Friday, September 17th at Zocalo Food Truck Park from 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. Your country, your heritage, your traditions are beautiful. My culture lives in me. Mi cultura vive en mí. More information available at mkefilm.org/HHM.
Well, thank you everyone so much for sticking around after the film, Missing in Brooks County, a wonderful film dealing with some important topics that we will talk about just a little bit. We have the co-directors here to talk about that. But before that, I want to remind everyone, please go to mkefilm.org. We have a whole slate of films for Hispanic Heritage Month, both virtual and in person. About 10 virtual films that sort of complement the films that you're seeing live in person there at the Oriental Theater. My name is Ernie Quiroz. I'm the Cine Sin Fronteras programmer, proud to have put together this slate of films and proud to welcome our directors, our co-directors, Lisa and Jeff of Missing in Brooks County. Lisa, Jeff, thank you so much for being here, taking time to talk to us.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I guess, let's start at the beginning. How did you come to this story, Eddie's story, this family stories, to tell this larger story of the border?
I think what got us making this film was a radio documentary that we heard about a forensic scientist at Baylor University named Lori Baker, who was doing exhumations of anonymously buried migrant crossers in South Texas. And Lisa and I had met each other at Trinity College in Hartford, Connecticut. We were both teaching there. We wanted to work on something together. And we were both really just moved by this story. I don't know, Lisa now lives in a border community, and she sees this problem and she sees it among her students. She's lived in Mexico. I have a sister-in-law from Mexico. I'm not sure, but we were just really touched by the story. We reached out to Lori Baker, who invited us to Texas, and she took us down to this place called Falfurrias that we'd never heard of. Maybe Lisa wants to finish the story.
Well, after we had our fast food lunch, we asked, okay, can we see the border? We'd like to see the border. And she told us, well, we're nowhere near the border. We're 70 miles north of the border. And that's when we really started to clue in that this was a different story than we had heard before. I live in southern Arizona. I've certainly heard of migrant deaths. That's something that happens here in Arizona. But what was going on in Texas was a different story, and we became very intrigued. And so we continued to go to Brooks County every few months for about 4 years. And we just kept digging further and further into the story, meeting more people, forming relationships. About a year and a half into filming, we met the Romans, who are the featured family in the film. And they live in Houston, and they reached out to us. They actually came upon our website. They were Googling Missing in Brooks County. Our film is Missing in Brooks County. And they found our website, and they emailed us, and they said, hey, we know our family member is missing. I don't know, maybe you can help us. Maybe we can help you. So we met them, and we met them at a Starbucks, and we just talked for a long time. And we asked them if they wanted to participate in the film, and they talked with their whole family and decided they wanted to participate. So that's how that happened.
Yeah, and then how did you guys meet Eddie? Did you meet him that first visit?
We did. Lori Baker introduced us to Eddie, and I must say we were a little late arriving because we'd been filming and we were overstaying at every location that Lori took us to, because what we were finding was just, we were fascinated. And so by the time we met Eddie, we were running quite late, and it was not we didn't get things started on the right foot, but we were able to regain the trust after a while.
Yeah. How did you decide? You had been working on this for 4 years, but how did you decide what was the narrative sort of skeleton of the film, and how, when, like, whose exact story you were going to tell? There's so many stories you could have told, so many family members, and not just Eddie, but so many different approaches. How did you decide this is the approach?
Well, I think when we met the Romans, we knew that their story was super powerful. One part of their story that was exceptional is the fact that they saved these recordings from the time that O'Mara went missing, with Border Patrol, with the guides, the coyotes. So we, they gave us all of this archival material, also videos and other things. And we felt like we could really tell their story from beginning to end. Not that it's ended, but, so I think they were ready to tell their story. I think that was a big part of it, because we had been filming with other families that didn't, after a while, seem like they maybe weren't ready emotionally to tell their story. And we felt like the Romans were ready. And, we just clicked with them. And so it became very clear very early on that they were going to be the main story. And maybe, Jeff, you want to mention something about when we began filming Juan's story, because that's the other story in the film. Right.
We actually met his cousin, the missing person, Juan Maceda, his cousin Moises, who's in the film, at the South Texas Human Rights Center when we were filming with Eddie. And that was a interesting story to bring into the mix, because he was actively missing, and it really added a sense of urgency, I think. And it was sort of the same process with Juan's father, who does not live in Texas. We reached out to him and told him what we were doing, and very bravely he agreed to have the story of his son included in the film. And I think he gave us a similar reason to the Roman family, which is that when someone goes missing, a loved one, you feel sort of powerless. I mean, especially in a system that is so full of dysfunction as the one in Texas is sometimes. And I think it gave the family members the feeling that maybe they could just do something for the next family, at least, maybe spare them a little bit of their pain.
I thought it was very interesting that you included both sides of sort of the debate of sort of this issue. And I was wondering why you felt that was important, and why you felt that was that you wanted to give a little bit of that balance. Particularly, I think it was Mike Vickers, is sort of very critical of some of the work that's being done. Why did you want to give him that platform?
I mean, I think one reason might be that, if you think of the context that we were making this film in, most of the film was made during the Trump administration, and there was so much division in this country. And I think we didn't really want to add to that. What we wanted to tell was a humane story, a story of human beings who are affected by this crisis. So you've got, ranch owners who are affected, you have activists, you have the forensic scientists and students, you have, of course, the families. And they're just Border Patrol, other law enforcement. There's just so many people that are affected by this crisis. And I think we were really drawn to telling that story, that these are human beings, and all of the people who are, working to find these human beings are human beings. And we really weren't interested in making something that was divisive.
Mm-hmm. Talk about, so this was a 4-year sort of in the making. How have you seen these issues evolve, the border issues evolve, or at least people's perceptions? You said, the bulk of this was made during the Trump administration. But obviously, there was a shift from Obama to Trump of sort of how border was perceived. And I feel like, now with Biden, there's been another shift. So what's your sense of, just the xenophobia, racism? It felt like under the Trump administration, it was okay to express some of those ideas. What's your feeling of how this has evolved?
Well, I do think that Trump's administration emboldened the worst in our country in many ways. What's strange about immigration, when you look at it on the political spectrum, is it sometimes challenges traditional assumptions. As you see in the film, the Clinton administration is actually responsible more than any other for the situation and the migrant deaths that are occurring today. And on the other side of that, the first and only time the government has passed a law taking even an ounce of responsibility for this was signed by President Trump, which is very strange to a lot of people. So the idea is that this is a bipartisan tragedy. I mean, this was really created by both sides. And if that's true, perhaps there can be a bipartisan solution. We didn't want to make a political film. We wanted to make a human film, like Lisa said. But I do think that we've seen some changes between the administrations. I mean, maybe Lisa, I don't know, she wants to chime in on some of that.
I mean, the only other thing I would say, I agree with all of that. Right now, things are worse. Things are getting worse in Brooks County. This has been a horrible summer for migrant deaths, with the temperatures increasing because of global warming. And the law enforcement, the sort of increased law enforcement that was put into place during the Trump administration along the border, also around these checkpoints, has created more dangerous situations because the walk becomes longer. So the guides drop everyone off further south and the walk becomes longer and therefore more dangerous. And so that's still in place. All of that is still in place. Then with the increased temperatures, more people coming during the Biden administration because they were waiting during the Trump administration for a new president. So really this summer has been one of the, if not the worst ever in Brooks County. So it's really interesting, like, how has it changed in the course of the 6 years we've been making this film? I mean, things have been getting worse. And also, so Brooks County is still dealing with the migrant deaths, but now there are other counties that are seriously dealing with them further west near El Paso, the Big Bend area. So, and they are not prepared. Brooks County's been dealing with this crisis for years, about a decade. So now Brooks County is, starting to think about training other counties to deal with this crisis.
Wow, that's just tragic. Before we get any farther, are there any resources if people are watching this and they want to help, or they want to help out Eddie and his mission, or how can they, on at least a small scale, before there's the legislative change, how can we help?
I mean, at the local level, if people are moved by the stories in this film, they can support Eddie's efforts. He's often the only one working at the South Texas Human Rights Center. He sometimes gets interns from one season to another, but he's the only one there who's got a operation based on the ground in Brooks County. And so he's always looking for support, whether that's funding for the water, to put the water out, or even volunteers. So that's one thing you can do. You can also, talk to you can call or write your leaders, whether they be state leaders if you're in Texas, or your national representatives, because obviously nothing really changes until lawmakers get an earful. And that's really one of the reasons that Lisa and I made the film, is we felt that if people could meet the families of the missing, they would feel differently about the way that we are running our border. And I think the lawmakers would feel differently about the policies they're creating.
And also, people who see the film, many people who see the film have told us they think everyone needs to see this film. And we think everyone needs to know about what's going on in Brooks County. So sharing the film, visiting our website. The film is playing at various festivals this fall, and the film will be on PBS in January 31st. It'll be on Independent Lens. And, you know, the idea is to begin to talk about immigration in a more humane way and begin to think about how we can look at this differently, because it's not working. What's the system in place right now is not working if so many people have died. And I think, you know, one thing that Jeff and I think is so critical in all of this is that people understand that the numbers that Border Patrol is reported, the numbers that they are reporting year after year are very, very low for various reasons. And when we went to find out the number of people who have died along the US-Mexico border since the early 90s, we talked to many, many people. And because 10,000 is what Border Patrol has reported. And when we asked them, well, 15,000? No, very conservative. 20,000, conservative. So we have no idea how many people have gone missing, but what they're reporting is 10,000, and that seems to be very, very low. If 1 in 5 people are found, then we're talking more like 50,000. And that's a lot of people. And I think no one knows this. No one knows this. I mean, people in Tucson, where I live, they know about migrant deaths, but that's because we live near the border and we have the issue here. But around the country, people do not know this is going on.
Yeah. No, and hopefully your film, like you said, is a powerful way to tell this story and to, you know, to sort of personify it, put a face on this issue, and hopefully affect some change. To kind of go back to what we were talking about being a bipartisan issue, you know, I think a lot of people forget or don't know that under Reagan, you know, there was essentially almost a worker program, an amnesty program. So there has been movement before, but I'm wondering if, you know, is the system broken, or is this the way the system is designed? You know, the system is almost designed to keep workers on the fringe, on the margins, and when we need them, we'll welcome them. But when we don't, you know, they're pushed out again.
Yeah. Well, and the irony is we do need them right now. So, yeah.
Well, sadly, you're right. I mean, this is the way the system was designed. Once upon a time, the enormous labor pool south of the US-Mexico border was considered a strategic national asset. People came and they went over the border. It was no big deal. But of course, the labor was being exploited in this country. And then we had a labor rights movement in the 20th century. And suddenly you couldn't do that anymore. And the capitalists, frankly, wanted to get back to what they had to begin with. So if you look into the history of it, you see that what they did is decide to criminalize migration, but only selectively enforce it so that people would still come, but they wouldn't dare demand their new labor rights, or they would be deported or barred. And that's essentially the system we still have today. But the fact is, the labor is needed. And, you know, we have a generational labor shortage that is only going to get worse because of the population numbers and trends.
Yeah, and to be honest, you know, this argument that, oh, they're stealing Americans' jobs, it's so ridiculous. I don't know.
We talked, when we were on our Texas tour just last week, Lisa and I talked to the owner of a restaurant on Highway 281, which is the smuggling corridor they talk about back and forth. He is a member of the Texas Border Volunteers, Mike Vickers' group. He lost his father to an undocumented immigration event that happened on their ranch. He has every reason to be, he's ex-law enforcement, very conservative politically, every reason to be anti-immigrant. So we asked him, so what do you think, the wall? He said, no. He said, well, what if they regularized migration, made it safe, and brought people into work and kept track, you know, kept the lines of communication open while people were here and took names and did background checks. He said, if you could do that, I would be all for it, because I can't find people for my restaurant. I would give them a job.
Yeah. So what? Another argument, since we're talking about the other side, who say it's a national security issue, that say, I don't know, terrorists are going to come over the border, and that's another kind of far-fetched notion.
Well, the
Yeah.
terrorists are here. I mean,
But, you know, then you would say don't push them into remote areas where you can't check people, their backgrounds who are coming through. You should regularize and control migration so that you can know who's coming and going.
So with Biden now in office, I mean, do you see sort of any hope? Or I know he's only been less than a year, and there's a lot of other issues going on. But do you see any sort of movement on this issue? How can we move the ball on this issue?
well, the advocates that we've been talking to, we've been doing a lot of impact work with the film, and we've been, meeting with immigration advocates, and they are not pleased with Biden at all. We were hopeful, but no. And it's hard, but I think you have to have hope. You have to continue to have hope that, people in our country are going to want to live in a country where this is not happening. So that's why we made the film. We want everyone to know this is happening and to not tolerate it. But in terms of Biden, I don't think anyone's feeling very hopeful right now.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. Thank you so much for making this film, sharing this film, and like you said, hopefully it can get to a wider audience, and hopefully it can move the needle like it needs to be moved. Any sort of final words or parting thoughts for us?
Well, I mean, Kate Spradley, who's in the film, likes to say that, she feels that any policy that deliberately results in the deaths of over 1,000 people a year needs to be examined. And I just hope that's one thing that people take away from the film.
Yeah, and we actually are going to DC next week to have a screening. So we keep pushing forward and doing what we can to make people aware of what's going on.
Okay, and we will do whatever we can as well as to help give a platform for your film to spread that message. So once again, thank you so much, everyone, for sticking around for this Q&A. Like I said, please film.org for the rest of the films. And thank you to Lisa and Jeff for Missing in Brooks County.
Thanks, Ernie.
Thank you. Bye-bye.